Folks, we're going to bring in Emily Tisch Sussman. She's here with us for a deeper look at the life and legacy of Senator Feinstein. She's the host of the She Pivots podcast and a political strategist. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. We've been hearing so much about Senator Feinstein and her decades-long career in politics. How will she be remembered?
Senator Feinstein really was one of the institutions of the Senate in so many ways, not just because she came in this wave, the year of the woman, where she and Barbara Boxer were both elected in 1992, in this wave of women that were elected and a wave of female voters that came out in 92, something that I think we're seeing again right now. So we look back to those kinds of moments in legacy. But she was such an institution because she had so many firsts. First woman chair of the Judiciary Committee, first woman chair of the Intelligence Committee, first woman chair of the incredibly powerful Rules Committee. Don't forget that when women were first elected to the Senate, there wasn't even a women's bathroom that was accessible off the floor. Like, this truly was not an institution that was made for women. And she came in committed to her issues coming from the fact that she had actually just witnessed her colleague Harvey Milk killed, and she had to then go out and become the mayor that very evening and speak to the crowd afterward. So she stayed committed to gun safety her entire career. She stayed committed to LGBTQ issues and AIDS research that was huge coming out of her district in California and San Francisco. But she was an institution in the Senate in the way that she really cared about decorum. She cared about keeping procedures going. She was always willing to work across the aisle and to have conversations across the aisle, something that we see, honestly, less and less as extreme partisans get elected in, even up to the higher body in the Senate.
I'm glad you mentioned some of this because context is super important, especially when you're considering somebody who's had a decades-long career. You mentioned the Milk assassination, the committed legacy to staying on top of issues that were important to her. You've had a chance to interview some of the most influential women alive today. What kind of impact did the late senator have on some of them and all women looking to make a life in politics?
Well, one of the things I thought was so interesting is that when Senator Feinstein was first elected, actually not as senator, but in local office, there was an interview by the newspaper. It interviewed her husband and asked him, said, basically, are you undermined by her? Are you intimidated by her? And he, of course, came back and said, no, of course I'm not. But even there in the question gives us the context for what it was like when she ran. The fact that she not just ran once, but ran many times, and in fact, was willing to run and lose in multiple offices and then run again. When she ran for Senate in 92, that was actually her second run in a row for Senate. So I think women who are looking now at how they can get involved if they want to run for office, we're seeing a huge wave of women over the last couple of years saying, I'm not going to wait until my kids are grown. I'm not going to wait until my second career. But part of that is failure, that you might not win the first time. And you have to be able to continue to run and really stay committed to the issues. I think she brings that to so many of us. You're not going to get it every time. You have to stay committed to it. I think that's a lot of the legacy of what she leaves, particularly for women in politics.
So much of this is important to keep in mind, especially as most of us are remembering Senator Feinstein and the sunset of her life. I'd be remiss if I didn't get your opinion on some of this. How exactly should we be thinking about Feinstein's age at a time when so much discussion was around how long politicians should be in their posts? I think it's extremely important to talk about somebody's legacy, but I'd like to get your thoughts on this. How should we be talking about age and whether people should continue to stay in their post once they reach a certain age?
Well, the reason we have the question is because the only really thing that determines whether someone's in office or not, in federal office, is if they're elected. We have no other, we have some citizenship requirements or voting requirements maybe, but we don't have fitness tests for whether they stay in office. The upper bodies, Congress and the Senate, and even the people running for president right now, look, they're old. And there's a big conversation about it. And actually, the average age of Congress is aging up, not down, unfortunately. She's not the first senator to have died while she was in office. While I was working in Congress and in the Senate, I saw senators take votes that we actually never thought they would take. And we think it's because their staff basically wheels them in to do so. So look, I do think it needs to be a big part of the question about ethics reform in our government in general, and like bring that in with Supreme Court as well, and justices and ethics reform. These are some of the big questions that we need to be taking up in the next couple of years for sure.
I want to finish up with this here. In thinking about Senator Feinstein and her legacy, I'm curious to know what kind of presence she brought to Congress. What kind of presence she brought to the upper chamber here? What do you make of just the presence that she had in her time as a senator?
Well, she had a real stature and a real formality about her. So when you bring that, you bring a real presence of seriousness. She took her job incredibly seriously. She took the hard assignments. She was on the hard committees. She chaired the hard committees. She worked unbelievably hard and expected that of her staff as well. And when you're around someone who brings that kind of formality and presence to it, it makes you stand up a little straighter. It makes you stay in the office a little bit longer to stay committed to it. You knew that she was not going to be slacking on her work, and you couldn't either. I think that is a piece of the presence that really will be missed.
Emily Tisch Sussman, host of She Pivots, thank you so much for your insight and your time. We appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit with us.
Thank you so much.